developments. Again, I want to emphasize this. The majority of the infections are in China. More than 78,000 cases. Again, almost 2,800 deaths. Again, all of this in China.
And with the growing number of confirmed coronavirus cases in the U.S., medical experts are starting to prepare for a larger outbreak. Here to give us more details is healthcare analyst Seth Denson. Seth, thanks for being with us this morning. What protective steps are the disease control organizations really taking to combat this virus?
Well, a lot of different things, right? We're looking and inventorying the materials that we do have available, whether that be tests, whether that be certain types of antibiotics and medications. The CDC is strategically structuring these things throughout the United States and placing them in areas that could be hotbeds, i.e. California and so on. But the federal government is really, they have gathered the most brilliant minds when it comes to healthcare, and at the end of the day, the United States is the best equipped to handle a situation like this. Let's not forget the United States is responsible for the vast majority of all innovation and advancement when it comes to healthcare in the United States. So we're very well positioned to make sure that we address this head on.
Almost all antibiotics come from China. When we hear something like that, a huge majority of antibiotics come from China. How do you stay on top of something like this when you think about a shortage that could possibly happening? Is there something we could have done differently to prepare for a moment like this?
Well, most certainly, and there's been some of us who have been sounding that alarm for years that are concerned of how many of the basic materials within our antibiotics are coming out of China. And unfortunately, and this is just the nature of the way that the pharmaceutical industry works, once a product becomes somewhat systematic in how it's structured, the ways of gathering the materials and manufacturing those drugs change. We need to bring more of those back to the United States. It is somewhat a little late for that. The positive side of that is that the brain power behind medication is here in the United States, and there are still factories online and manufacturers online here in the United States making drugs each and every day. And even just yesterday, companies like Gilead Pharmaceuticals came out and announced that they've got a solution to the coronavirus that they are currently in testing on and could have as quickly as April. So I think that there are solutions here, but again, when this settles, and it will come to an end at some point, I think it's time for us here in the United States to take a closer look at where we're getting our manufactured antibiotics and drugs from, and hopefully bring some of that back on shore here in the United States.
Seth, we're seeing different countries shutting down schools for months now. Religious sites that are never closed are being shut down just to protect people in those areas. Do you think we'll continue to see this, and is it an effective decision to do so?
I think it's effective in some of the countries that maybe don't have the infrastructural healthcare system that we do here in the United States. And those that may be closer to where this all started, or maybe didn't take the steps that we did here in the U.S. of closing making some travel restrictions. So I think for those countries, they're taking the steps that they think are necessary for their society. I don't think that's necessary yet here in the United States. I don't think we're anywhere close to that here. And again, I think that the administration took the right steps initially when this all came out to say, hey, listen, we're going to slow down the travel from those countries that are affected. We're still potentially expanding that now. And so for those other countries, I think that they're taking the right steps that they feel necessary, but that's definitely not the steps that we need to take as of yet here in the U.S.
Another step being taken is a piece of legislation from Senator Hawley of Missouri. I want to see if you're familiar with this. He calls it the Medical Supply Chain Act, essentially giving more powers to the FDA over regulation, specifically of medical devices. What do you think about this, and really, is it going to help?
Well, listen, I think that there's going to be a lot of proposals that are going to come out in the days to come as this is kind of front and center. And I think we all need to analyze all of the various aspects of them. I mean, no question that the FDA needs to restructure how it regulates certain things from out of the country coming in, or certain new manufacturers coming into play here in the United States. It's one of the things that I write about in my book, is that we have the FDA almost serving as somewhat of a protectionism agency sometimes for U.S.-based manufacturers. And we need to bring some more opportunities and some more options of getting specific medical, not only just devices, but also drugs here into the United States.
Hey, Seth, we've got the Olympics coming up in Japan in July. We're going to have American athletes competing at the games. Now, no official decision has been said about whether they'll be changing any schedule. Everything's set to go on as normal. But with the way the virus is going right now, do you see that there will be changes to the games?
Well, listen, I think that time will tell on that. We've got a little bit of time before decisions have to be made. But again, it's also not one of those things you want to make at the 11th hour. I think that the next 2 weeks will be critical to see how quickly we are containing this, not just here in the U.S., but globally, and how protected and the rest of the world is. The other thing to keep in mind is we start to see, now that this is really beyond just China, is what is the kind of the natural progression of this illness? What is the typical time frame that it's going to be subsiding? Plus, let's not forget that we're coming out of some of the winter months, at least in some parts of the country or some parts of the world. And so what is the overall, we'll call it period in which this illness is going to stay in effect? So listen, that is kind of the final straw is let's cancel the Olympics. I personally don't think we get there. But listen, I'm going to withhold my final thought on that for the next couple of weeks as we see how this thing progresses.
All right, that's Seth Denson. He's healthcare analyst joining us here talking about coronavirus. We appreciate it.